Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. It's episode 36 of the Embodied Business Inspired Brain podcast. Happy spring. If you're listening in real time-ish, it's May and the weather is glorious. Is it nice for you, Anne, in Sonoma County?
It is. It is really, really nice. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
I know. It's so just uplifting and enlivening. My garden is going absolutely insane already, which I love. All right, so let's get to it. We are talking about cultivating joy-seeking behavior for high performance living. Gosh, that is a lot to unpack. This is really just the tip of the iceberg, but Anne and I have been up to some really inspiring stuff. And we're going to tell you a little bit about that, but it culminates. I'm just going to do a little spoiler alert so you don't have to wait to the end. It culminates in an amazing new program that we have just created and we are launching momentarily, called the Elevated Entrepreneur, which is a beautiful year-long polyvagal-informed journey for high-achieving entrepreneurs and leaders who want to amplify their ambition, not give up their ambition or their drive, but expand it and expand their sense of ease and flow and joy in the process. So I always say, I'm a fan of having it all. I'm a little greedy that way. I think it's possible. And this program really supports entrepreneurs who have complex, sometimes chaotic and overwhelming lives because we have big dreams and big desires. It supports them in taking that anxiety edge off, being able to step into flow, being able to transition with grace and ease. That's a big one for us. And it supports them and you in cultivating joy-seeking behavior. And this is a piece I know Anne believes really strongly in. We're going to tell you a little bit more about how you can learn about this program and join us. So, but for now, what's in process, what's in progress? We like to start this way. Anything on your mind today, Anne?
Yeah, I'm getting ready for a trip that I will be going on. I'm going to go back. I've actually got a memorial service that I'll be attending.
Yeah.
And as sad as that is, it is an opportunity to really convene with family again that I might not always get to see. So I am really looking forward to my time there.
Yeah. And you, I think that entrepreneurs, leaders, and coaches and busy folks listening will appreciate this about both of us. You mentioned yesterday the long plane ride, because you're headed all the way to the East Coast, I think, right?
Yes.
Which is
yes.
a long plane ride. And looking forward to those long plane rides because they give us a chance to dive in to something, without distraction. So I totally appreciate that too. Yeah, I think for me, I'm just we've been so steeped in creating and launching this program. I'm just loving it. I'm loving the kind of re-inspired, reinvigorated focus and taking this big, beautiful body of work that we have around the nervous system and stretching it out beyond for more people and talking to more people in a way that we haven't yet explicitly. And that has been really thrilling. And I'm so excited. We're actually later today offering a masterclass called Optimizing Ambition, which is all a preview of the Elevated Entrepreneur Program. And I'm just pretty stoked about it. So that's what's going on for me. So let's dive in and talk about joy-seeking behavior and how it relates to high-performance living. I'm going to let you take this away because I think you are the one that first kind of brought this up and coined that term, I think, for us. And so share the beginnings.
Absolutely. So Chantel, you introduced me to the nervous system work. And it's funny how, upon reflection, I remember many years ago, my story about becoming a Pilates studio owner for 20 years was I kind of fell into Pilates, and then I started doing it, and I'm starting to feel that way a little bit about the nervous system work. It's just becoming such an integral part of my life. And I wasn't really expecting that to be the case. And I think it's because it's the deep transformative power of it. And it's such a foundational skill to have and to uplift us. So to answer your question, from all of the reading that we do when we're working in the nervous system integration facilitation program with our alumni or our cohorts, we do a lot of reading, and we're reading in a lot of books around people who are sort of titans in the field. And within one book by Deb Dana, she speaks a lot to this concept of glimmers and joy. But first, I really came and learned about the nervous system work a little bit more from this understanding of like a trigger, and then trauma is a thing that we hear a lot about in the world right now, and just with the concept of COVID and the world going, like a community trauma that we all experienced. But again, like Chantel and I, we are not schooled, or at least certainly I am not schooled in working with trauma. And that is not something that lights me up in the same way as getting excited about this concept of joy, of seeking joy. And so I think first, when I first came to the nervous system work, I really was looking at it through the lens of, well, what's triggering me? And not in a trauma way, but just like in a more, like and sometimes it is trauma, but sometimes it's just like, what's irritating me? What sends me on a spiral? Or when I'm working with clients, what I call it a cul-de-sac, where so you're sort of like ruminating on an idea for a while that isn't really getting you someplace. And so I think I really had this perception of polyvagal work, trigger, what are triggers? And then all of a sudden we started leaning in and speaking more to the joy and more to this concept of glimmers. And it allowed me to reflect on my schooling and my understanding of the brain, and how the brain is always like trying to essentially determine threat, and we're sort of avoiding threat. And so I was just sort of spinning these ideas around in my brain and thinking about them. And as someone who has dealt on and off with chronic pain throughout my life, I've absolutely taken on behaviors that have caused me to just avoid a trigger. And so that's sort of a behavior where all you're doing is trying to avoid something, basically.
Yeah, right.
And you're doing it in very subtle ways, or sometimes in very, very explicit ways. I've always been someone who's been very like private about it. I don't like to talk about it. So even me talking about it on the podcast is always a little bit of a stretch, but I know that I know by me talking about it, it's going to support others. And so it's sort of like, and it just got me thinking, because I had this very deep behavior trait of trigger avoidance, essentially chronic pain trigger avoidance within my life. And then other behaviors in my life. But for me, it's the chronic pain piece that like sticks, is the most like one that I'm most aware of within my own personal experience. So, but then I also have this optimistic side about me. I'm always sort of sometimes I might even say, oh, I'm like chasing the next idea, but it's like when I chase those next ideas, I get a lot of joy out of it. So in some ways that's a joy-seeking behavior. But it made me realize at that point, those were two separate things. So I'd be excited about learning new things that I can do for my business or that I can do in my life. And that's a joy-seeking behavior. But then with the experiences with pain and things like that, that was more just avoidance behavior. And so I said, okay. And then I think, Chantel, you were having a person you were supporting who was experiencing chronic pain off and on. And I said, hey, one of the things that you can do is help them experience joy even if they're in the pain, because
Mm.
that is how, when you're able to have more joy in your life, you build your reserve. And that's sort of an essence of resilience. Because
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with the concept of resilience because I was like, I don't ever really feel like I'm actually that resilient. Because if
Mm.
you're always only trying to avoid something and you're never filling your cup with joy, you don't have resilience, because you're basically you're just always trying to get to this concept of zero, or this concept of
Mm-hmm.
neutrality, which is one thing
Mm-hmm.
we speak to in the awareness of the nervous system. Do you feel unpleasant, neutral, or pleasant? And so if you're
Mm-hmm.
only trying to get yourself from unpleasant to neutral, then, and you're never growing yourself to I'm feeling pleasant, then
Mm-hmm.
anytime, if you're only at neutral and something dysregulating happens, then you immediately go into unpleasant. And so it was the constellation of these ideas that really made me think, for me on a very deeply personal level, I need to work towards joy-seeking behavior. And then once I had the for me, once I intellectually understand something, I'm like, okay, I got it. I get it. Okay, I'm just going to run with it. Um, and what I found is when I started doing that, it then actually became less intellectual, because
Mm-hmm.
I was I was, at some times you do have to like kind of force yourself in an intellectual way. I'm going to try this new technique. I don't know if it's going to work. But then when you actually do something that elicits joy for you, then it's a way of being, instead of something that's always like, I'm going to do this like strategy because intellectually I understand that it works. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think what I really experienced in the last few months was joy seeking behavior that was just emerging and bubbling
Mm.
up, which to me is truly resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope, as I described all this, I appreciate the time you gave me. And I hope the audience can hear and see for themselves. Maybe they have this constellation of experiences, and you can find a place in your life where it truly makes a difference. To lean into joy-seeking behavior, and that it might be intellectual at first, but then there's this emergence that can happen that is really organic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it. All of it. And my brain is like a big bag of popcorn.
Great, good.
Of, so I want to circle back to two things. Let me say them out loud and you can hold me accountable to speaking to both. One is this, I think one of the major roadblocks that humans have, particularly in the Western world, and with the like unending growing complexity of our lives, is that we may not believe that we have a dualistic outlook on life, and yet we totally do. And it's like, and so what I mean by that is, if I am experiencing pain, and it could be chronic pain in the body, it can be anxiety. Like the thing I really struggle with is overwhelm. With that's my particular flavor of dysregulation that I live in. Like it comes up a lot for me. So whatever the pain is, it's like we nothing has stretched us to believe that life is actually non-dualistic. Like I can be overwhelmed and still be fucking kicking ass and having these little sparks of like, oh, that's great. And then I feel the overwhelm, but I'm not stuck in it. Like I can have
Yes.
both experiences. And that I think is just a piece that is hard for people to grasp. Nobody has taught us how to do it. Nobody demonstrates it, not actively, at least, socially and culturally. And I know that that's a big piece of your chronic pain work, that you have studied and learned and shared with people. And that I think for me is it's the crux. It's literally the crux of the Elevated Entrepreneur Program too, is you can be busy, you can have a full life, it can even be overwhelming and chaotic sometimes. And that's not the only thing it is. right? It can
Mhm.
also be joyful and uplifting and exciting and nurturing and all of these things. So I think this is a big paradigm shift for a lot of folks to say it's not just eliminate the pain. Don't just, the
Yes.
goal is not, as you say, just to come to neutral, right? The goal is not just get regulated, just eliminate, in our nerdy nervous system language, we say, cues of danger. Like, don't just seek to eliminate cues of danger because you spend all your time. It's like when you spend all your time trying to improve your weaknesses, but you never elevate your strengths. It's that kind of conundrum.
Mhm.
So I wanted to like lift that up out of what you shared, because I hope that people can see or maybe contemplate whether or not that's a place where they're getting stuck. And it's not easy. And then you have to cultivate awareness and the tools to lean toward joy seeking behavior and joy in moments of chaos and anxiety and overwhelm and pain, which then kind of leads me to the second piece, which is you're speaking to, and I know this is like an important concept because, we talk about this, and actually our next podcast, we're going to dive into this more. We think of it as like the twofold path. It's like your very first goal with the nervous system work is to develop awareness, and we use a technique called a stop and listen question, and it's the moment of recognizing the state we're in so that we can take action. And that's very intellectual, that's very purposeful. It takes concentration, it takes intention. And when you are learning any new skill, right? So one thing we talk a lot about is the conscious competence learning matrix. That's part of our nerdy educational background. But from that perspective, what we can say and what we know is that when you're learning any new skill, it is very intellectual. It's very top down processing. It's very much like you need a checklist. You need to like, okay, I'm going to ask my stop and listen question. I'm going to take a breath and notice and acknowledge, like, this is my physiology talking to me and sending me messages. I don't have to respond to it. And then we can be in choice. And the choice can be, I'm going to seek joy. I'm going to seek joy is down regulating, right?
Mhm.
Seeking
Mhm.
joy will bring us back to regulation, but it's like supercharged because it pushes us right into not just neutral, but that sense of expansiveness where we can step back into flow after some disruption in our day or challenge in the workflow. And we spend a lot of time there in that, like, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's the strategy. I'm going to do it. I do it. I feel better. Right. And we can get such quick access, such immediate access to a healthier, more regulated nervous system many, 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 many times a day. And I like to say it takes 20 seconds to 5 minutes. Like, that's it. That's it. But do it over and over and over again. And pretty soon you get to the other side of the conscious competence learning matrix where it's bottom up. You're not thinking about it. Bottom up processing in the brain is more qualitative, right? And you were speaking to like, it's just arising. It's just emerging. It's more
Mhm.
intuitive. It's innate. It's ingrained. Like, that is the magic over time. It's the magic that builds and transforms your life forever because the accumulation of the little bits, the little bits, the little bits, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, it is just the way I orient. And that happens. We've talked a lot about this. I think of them as like literally like magical moments where you're in upheaval, but you're like, oh, I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine. Or like, oh, I just recovered so much more quickly from that, catastrophe or whatever hard thing. And I'm like, I don't feel, bless you. Good job muting yourself. You don't feel like overly exhausted, like you have to sleep for a week. You don't feel like you can't talk to anybody. Like there is less cost, right, to the disruption and the dysregulation. So that is just a natural process of learning. And what you're doing is cultivating new behaviors, right? But it happens only when you start to become aware in this very specific way to your unique nervous system, right? And its voice, what it's telling you and how it's talking to you. So those are the things I wanted to say that you
Yeah,
inspired.
very absolutely. And I think as you were speaking, what came up for me and what has been what I think I've liked this work so much is because it is based in science. And it's something I've always been curious about is awareness, although I will say I am not very good at it. Because years ago, I was reading a study about your ability to feel your heartbeat
Mm-hmm.
is a great indicator of your awareness, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have bad rhythm. I can't feel my heartbeat. And I don't know if it's because it's the structure of my arteries or it's the
Mm,
sensor, like the biological sensors in my body, or I wasn't brought up in an environment where that was the case. I don't know why.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it's interesting. And I remember feeling, but what I do like is I do so strongly believe in look, you can learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you start where you start, and some people are really good at it. My husband is actually very aware of his heartbeat
Yeah,
and
you've
very
shared that
aware.
before. Yeah.
So it's like, and some people are just better at that, for whatever reason. And sometimes I do just think it's anatomy. Like your anatomy
Mm-hmm.
may be different, which allows you to be able to sense things within your body more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then otherwise it could be learned um, but I just feel like if I can become aware of this, you can become aware of this because
Mm,
I started at a low place for I think most people, and it just gives me a lot of hope that you know you it's teachable, right? Because I
mm-hmm.
would look. I remember there was a woman who owned a yoga studio next to my Pilates studio for many, many years. And she was just the most grounded person in the world. And she just
Mm,
seemed to have this sense of self awareness that
mm-hmm.
I thought I could never get it. I thought it was something you were born with. Like I had a fixed mindset around it,
Yeah.
that it's an innate thing, that you can't learn it. And I was like, I guess I just will never learn how to be resilient. I can
Mm,
push because of my lack of ability to be resilient. Maybe I got very good at just pushing through things. And I feel like this work has allowed me to learn to be the grounded woman in the room, right? To
yeah.
be in an embodied way. Because I think intellectually I've been a pretty grounded person, but also in a physical way. And I just want to encourage people, like, this is not out of your reach. it's just it's just new science, right? The
Mm-hmm.
polyvagal theory has not been around for that long. People have sometimes questioned it, whether it's something that is, the science behind it is strong enough. But I can say from my personal experience that it is, and through the work that we do with others and the anatomy behind it, that it is a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful model in
Mm-hmm.
which to self reflect, to build resilience, and to essentially, for me, build joy seeking behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very strongly that it's completely learnable, and it's completely teachable, and it
Yeah.
works really well also, for if you're really ambitious.
Yeah, because I mean, the demand on us, if we want a lot, is that our lives are a lot. And it does not all go smoothly. I mean, I think about this on a daily basis. It's like when I get real tied up in something not going right, I'm like, what is it that I'm expecting actually? Like, like I work so hard at keeping my life good, like caring for my things, making sure my finances are in order, taking care of my kids, managing my home. Like I'm like on it. Right. And I love it. I love being on it. I wouldn't have it any other way. But then when things go awry, I sometimes am like laughing at myself. And this is part of having a resilient nervous system. You can just be like,
Right. Yeah.
why? Like, chill the fuck out, lady. Like, why are you freaking out? Like, it just happens. You're human and there's so many things out of your control.
Yeah.
But when your life is full and you're kicking ass in it, and that's what you want, and you want it to be varied and you want it to be adventurous and you want a lot, you have to have more skills like this. You have to have this skill truly so that you can like really flow and dance with your life without these periods of like burnout and breakdown and not being able to show up for other people or being able to not being able to show up for yourself, or for me, like really struggling with transitions between work and home or being away from home and coming back home. All of that just smooths out. Like all that anxious edginess just smooths out. And it's not that it doesn't arise, but you have such a sense of kindness and compassion for yourself and for others that it's like softer, and you can recover and return to that sense of not just neutral, but total radness.
Yes. And I think for me, like that self compassion, I'm trying to think because, again, like I didn't have a lot of self compassion. And there's been a lot of research around self compassion, a lot of meditation around self compassion. But for whatever reason, the meditation pieces did not resonate with me. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, they weren't the thing that like got me self compassion. But what has allowed me to have self compassion actually is the nervous system work. And I think for me, it's something about the biology. It's like when I think about biology, there's something like wild about it. There's something untamed about it. There's something organic about it. And it's like, for me, it's like I can be like, oh, that's like my little biological baby. Like there's some sort of self-love there, right? There's some sort of self-compassion there, instead of like, that's my biology. I mean, like, I'm not, it's, I don't have the total description about why the self compassion was able for me to occur within the context of nervous system work versus the context of meditation around self compassion. But for some reason, the self compassion just really emerged from understanding and practicing the nervous system work. And I think that would be very interesting to explore more. But I think there's just something about, I feel like I'm able to nurture myself when I think of myself as a biological being who's having an experience and my biology is expressing itself that way, which
I mean,
for some reason didn't come up in other contexts.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a particular tone that this work is taking on in certain domains. And because so much of my learning has come through Deb Dana and her programs, Rhythm of Regulation, and through the Polyvagal Institute with Stephen Porges and Michael Allison, there is a language that's being cultivated around compassion specifically. Like when we can acknowledge that our physiology is behaving all the time with our best interest in mind, like it's like there's literally like, oh, that's my biology just sending me a message. It's like it creates, I talk a lot about this, as you know, like the space between the experience and then the meaning I'm making out of the experience. When we become aware of like, oh, my biology is doing this, like it's not me, my thinking mind, the way I make meaning out of things. Like it is such a profound opportunity to really cultivate these other qualities that we try to cultivate in meditation, like being an objective observer of ourselves. Was sitting down for hours and minutes and hours at a time, or over time, to try to kind of figure out from the mind how to separate the experience from the judgment of the experience is incredibly hard. But when you can see like, oh, there is a system within me, my autonomic nervous system, that is automatically driving the bus all the fucking time, all the time, unconsciously, all the time. And so it's not volition, but it is driving behavior. And so this language of like, oh, I can stop and listen, and I can notice that like my biology is freaking the fuck out. And my job is to listen. That's it. And then when we do that, it's like that spaciousness of like, I can cut myself a little slack, and I have a tool, and I have some tools for shifting. I don't just have to accept it, but it's energizing, right? Because then it cuts out the self-deprecation and the self-judgment, which is so painful. It's so painful, and it stops us from growing and changing our behavior. But as I will always say, the nervous system is the root of all behavior, which is what Porges says. And I truly believe it. Like when your nervous system is dysregulated, it is driving behavior that is not optimal all the time, right? It might be like keeping us safe, but is it accurately keeping us safe? And are we behaving in a way that is appropriate for the messages we're getting? So I totally get this. And I think it's important. And I do think for folks who have aversion to things like meditation or have tried it and struggled, this work is such a beautiful opportunity and opening to make really big shifts toward joy without needing to force yourself into the meditation container or the yoga container or whatever container you've tried that hasn't worked,
Yeah. And if those are working for you, great.
Yeah, I mean, I do all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just another powerful,
that's it,
in your toolbox.
Yeah. Again, it's non-dualistic. It's not an either or. It's like use everything you have at your disposal. I have meditated on and off for 25 years. I've done yoga for as long. Like it all works sometimes, and then sometimes it doesn't work for me. But this work is with me always. It's so accessible and powerful. Like the results, I feel like, are tangible and immediate and cumulative.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel those cumulative effects, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap things up. We're just super excited about this topic, as you can tell, and about our new program, Elevated Entrepreneur, which is a year-long Polyvagal-informed program and process. And we are officially launching this June 1st. So if you're listening in the month of May,
2024.
Reach out. Yeah, 2024. Thanks. We are going to put a link to some information about this program and an opportunity for you to chat with us about it to see if it's the right fit for you. You can join anytime. Doors are always open. We do have an intro special right now, and prices are going up June 1st. So you're going to want to check that out if you are listening before June 1st, 2024. But we'll get you all the information. And I think that's it. Super excited. Yeah. Thanks so much. Always great to be with you, Anne. Thanks, everybody. Bye.